नमस्कार, आप देख रहे हैं CNBC आवाज और यह है खास मुलाकात। आज हमारी खास मुलाकात हो रही है कोटक महिंद्रा बैंक के ज्वाइंट मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर जयराम से। जयराम साहब, हमारे लिए वक्त निकालने के लिए आपका बहुत शुक्रिया। अभी का जो माहौल है उसमें जाहिर है कि हम कुछ भी बात करें तो चुनाव और पॉलिटिक्स की बात आ जाती है, तो एक लॉन्ग टर्म ओवरव्यू हम आपसे लेना चाहेंगे इस मुलाकात में। लेकिन इसके पहले कि मैं उन बड़े सवालों पर आऊं, अभी सबसे बड़ा कंसर्न बाजार का ये है कि असेंबली रिजल्ट के बाद ऐसा लगा कि बाजार ऊपर चलेगा, लेकिन फिर थोड़ा सा करेक्शन आया है और शायद ये करेक्शन ठीक ही हो। लेकिन जिस तरह के नंबर आ रहे हैं ग्रोथ के और महंगाई के, WPI CPI दोनों, और उसके बाद जो टेपर का हम लोग हमेशा बात करते रहते हैं कि वो आएगा तो पता नहीं क्या होगा बाजार को, तो बाजार ने अब इलेक्शन को पीछे छोड़ दिया है और दूसरे देश के और अमेरिका के मैक्रो इंडिकेटर पे फोकस कर रहा है। ये कहना सही होगा?
Yes, Ajay, I think that is correct because currently, clearly, the emphasis in markets is on the immediate short term, which has to, first of all, do with monetary policy on the 18th, as well as the Fed meeting. And I think clearly the last set of numbers which have come out, both on inflation as well as on IIP, etc., have been much below expectations. So in that sense, I think right now the market is concerned about these twin problems which we have, which is both lack of growth as well as inflation, which does not seem to be coming under control.
जी, ऐसे में अब चूंकि ग्रोथ की ऐसी बुरी हालत है और इन्फ्लेशन और लगता है कि बढ़ेगा ही, तो ये अब करीब करीब पक्का माना जा रहा है कि जो RBI की पॉलिसी आएगी बुधवार को, उसमें रेट बढ़ेगा।
हाँ, लगता है ऐसा कि that at least 25 basis points rise will come in, and obviously for RBI it will be a difficult decision because clearly growth has not happened. It is still under a lot of pressure, but in spite of that, I think because of the last inflation numbers, particularly CPI numbers, I think they will be forced to hike interest rates probably by about 25%. Probably by 25 basis points.
जी, तो अभी का माहौल ये है कि हमको हर हाल में इन्फ्लेशन को कंट्रोल करना है, चाहे ग्रोथ कम हो जाए। तो ग्रोथ तो ऑलरेडी इतनी ज़्यादा कम हो गई है, इन्फ्लेशन का आने वाले दिनों में प्रोजेक्शन कैसा दिख रहा है? क्योंकि जनरली अब CPI का जो बिहेवियर है उसको अगर आप ठीक से डिटेल में आप अगर हमारे लिए एनालाइज करें तो आपसे ये समझना बड़ा ज़रूरी होगा कि ये कहा जा सकता है कि इन्फ्लेशन तो चुनाव आते आते और बढ़ने ही वाला है, तो सरकार ऐसा कुछ नहीं करेगी जिससे कि ग्रोथ को बढ़ाने के लिए मदद मिले, क्योंकि उसको महंगाई को कंट्रोल करना है।
No, that's a good point, and the only hope is that they will not withdraw some of the steps which they have been taking to control inflation. For example, I think there is a demand from some political quarters that the monthly increase in diesel prices should be stopped till elections. I hope that will not be the case because so far the finance minister has taken a reasonably firm view and said that he has a red line in terms of what the fiscal deficit should be. So I hope that some of those things don't get overturned as we get closer to the elections. And I think the other important thing from an inflation perspective is that given the fact that we had good monsoons and good agricultural crops, there is a possibility that food, vegetable inflation, etc., could come down a little bit over the next few months. And I think it's only when the Reserve Bank feels that has actually happened, that inflation has started to come under control, that you will start to see any easing off in interest rates.
जी, चूंकि बार बार बात होगी कि ग्लोबल फैक्टर कैसे पैन आउट होते हैं, तो फेड की मीटिंग, टेपर का जो भी कैलेंडर दिख रहा है, वो अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट के जिस तरह के डेटा आ रहे हैं, और उसमें हमारी चिंता तो सिर्फ यही है कि FII आता रहे, उसका पैसा आता रहे, जो आता हुआ दिख भी रहा है। लेकिन क्या आपको ये फिक्र है कि कहीं वो पैसा आना रुक भी सकता है और वो बाजार के लिए खराब खबर होगी, क्योंकि US की इकोनॉमी में और इंप्रूवमेंट आ रहा होगा?
नहीं, लॉन्ग टर्म ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए बिकॉज क्लियरली there might be immediately, if at some point of time they announce tapering, there could be some immediate short-term impact. But on a longer-term basis, I think the last 2 years have shown that in spite of all the difficulties that India has had as a domestic economy, you have still seen significant FII inflows into the country. And I don't think that is going to change. Now, obviously, that can look a lot better if, as a result of the elections which we have middle of next year, there is a sort of broader belief that the Indian economy can now sort of start to look at some more decisive policy decisions, in which case you can actually see the flows increase a little bit. But I don't think there is very much downside to FII flows because we've seen that in the last 2 years, with all the troubles that India has gone through, FII inflows have still been fairly significant.
आप ये कह रहे हैं कि अब सेंटिमेंट एफआईआईज का ऐसा है कि भले ही अभी से इलेक्शन तक कुछ और नहीं भी हो, जैसा चल रहा है वैसा चले, तो अगली सरकार आएगी और चीजें इंप्रूव होगी, इस सेंटिमेंट पर फ्लो आते रहेंगे, या इस फ्लो को सस्टेन करने के लिए कुछ चुनाव के पहले और करने की जरूरत है?
चुनाव के पहले I don't think there are any expectations about any policy decisions, because any sensible analyst will know that in the next few months, it is very unlikely that you will see any significant economic policy announcements from the government. So I think a lot of the movement over the next few months will be premised off politics, at least from a domestic perspective, in terms of what the opinion polls are sort of showing over the next few months, what sort of trends are they sort of indicating. And I think those will be probably the more important domestic factors. Obviously, global factors will be very critical as well, where we talked about tapering and also how the US economy is doing. Those are significant factors which will weigh in as well.
जयराम साहब, अभी कुछ हफ्ते पहले जब हमने चिदम्बरम साहब को इंटरव्यू किया तो उन्होंने दो बातें कही कि एक तो आप लोगों का ये जो इम्प्रेशन है कि कॉरपोरेट सब पैसे नहीं उठा रहे हैं बैंक से, ये गलत है और इन्वेस्टमेंट की शुरुआत हो चुकी है, ये साइकिल अब धीरे धीरे मूव होने लग गया है और लोग अब कैपिटल इन्वेस्टमेंट करना शुरू कर रहे हैं। आपका क्या असेसमेंट है इस बारे में?
I am not necessarily sure that at this point of time we can say that the investment cycle has got kick-started. And I think that will actually happen only when the environment believes that there is decisive policy making which is happening or which can happen over the next year or two. And I think at this point of time it would be difficult to sort of say that that is actually happening.
Joblessness एक सीरियस प्रॉब्लम है। इसको अगर मैं आपसे समझना चाहूं कि अभी अलग अलग सेक्टर को जो आप लोग ट्रैक करते हैं उसमें एम्प्लॉयमेंट का सीन क्या दिख रहा है? आपको लगता है कि कहीं भी कोई ऐसा मूवमेंट है जिससे कि नौकरियां क्रिएट हों, या ये भी एक ऐसा इशू है कि अब हमको चुनाव तक ही इंतजार करना पड़ेगा?
In recent times, almost all the fresh job creation that has happened in the Indian sort of economy has happened from the services sector. And clearly that hence will continue to be a very important part over the next few years. But having said that, I think what we have been missing over the last few years is any sort of real impetus in the manufacturing sector. And I would argue that for India to go to the next level, it's very important that this be given enough importance and Indian manufacturing sort of go to the next level, so that not only can they create more jobs, but that we can be a far more competitive economy globally.
जी, एक दूसरा इशू बहुत डिस्कशन में रहा है बैंकिंग सेक्टर, और उसमें जो एनपीएस की प्रॉब्लम बहुत सीरियस होती जा रही है और अब डेट को रिस्ट्रक्चर करने का एक ऐसा सिलसिला चला है जिस पर भी कंसर्न हो रहा है, सख्ती से मना किया जा रहा है कि आप ऐसा ना करें। इस पर मैं आपके थॉट्स लेना चाहूँगा कि ये कितनी बड़ी प्रॉब्लम आपको दिख रही है और इसमें अगर हमको एक वार्निंग के तौर पर फ्लैग करना हो तो आप क्या फ्लैग करेंगे?
नहीं, एब्सोल्युटली ये बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है और currently partly because the economy is also going through a fairly sluggish period, you are seeing NPAs which have been rising, particularly with the public sector banks. And I think what historically or the last couple of years at least we have been doing is moving many of these accounts to the CDR sort of side and assuming that the corporate debt restructuring will take care of the problem over the next few years. I think that assumption is now started to be questioned. And I think some of the problems are fairly serious. So to that extent, I think recently we have heard the Reserve Bank, particularly the governor, making strong statements saying that there is no fundamental right for promoters to stay with their businesses if they have have not repaid the banks, etc. So I hope that some of those measures are taken to their logical conclusions, and if we have large promoters who have defaulted on their commitments and where there are huge overdues to the banks, etc., that the NPAs are not only sort of not pushed to the CDR, but actually sort of handled much quicker, but also that strong steps are taken against the promoters of such companies to make sure that if required, the companies are sort of moved out of their hands and into stronger hands.
और प्राइवेट बैंक्स में भी आप देख रहे हैं कि एनपीए की प्रॉब्लम अब बढ़ रही है या वहाँ नहीं है?
नहीं है, I mean, ऐसा नहीं है कि प्राइवेट बैंक्स में नहीं है. Clearly the issues are there. I think they are probably at a level lower than what is there in the PSU banking system. And I think fortunately, I think the private banks address these issues a little earlier than the the public sector banks. And to that extent, probably hence it's more transparent and in the open. But there also there is a problem, and I think which needs to be corrected fairly quickly.
जी, अभी चूंकि नए बैंकिंग लाइसेंस मिलने हैं, तो उसके बारे में क्या आपका अनुमान है कि ये कोर्स पे है, वक्त पे मिल जाएगा, और कैसे लोगों को नए बैंकों के लाइसेंस मिलने चाहिए?
No, I think there have been some announcements which have been made by the Finance Ministry and the Reserve Bank that they would like to give some of these licenses by January 2014, etc. I am not aware as to whether those sort of timelines are still intact, but my sense is that they would probably be done in more than one phase, this allocation of bank licenses. And probably the more non-controversial sort of applicants would be granted licenses in the first phase.
जी, चूँकि आप लोगों को अपने टाइम टेबल पे काम करना है, प्रमोटर स्टेक को रिड्यूस करना है, तो जाहिर है कि कुछ पैसे हाथ में होंगे, और चर्चा ये है कि आप लोग भी कुछ एक्विजिशन करने को देख रहे होंगे. उसके बारे में कोई नई जानकारी अगर आप हमको देना चाहें तो.
No, I think we have made our position on this very clear. I mean, we have philosophically nothing against acquisitions, but we will do it only when we feel that there is enough value on the other side. And if we see value in terms of an acquisition, we are happy to look at it, but we will not make acquisitions for the sake of doing it.
एक और रेपुटेशन है आपकी कि वापस इससे हम मैक्रो इशू पे आएंगे और फिर आगे के पॉलिटिकल आउटलुक पे आएंगे, और वो ये है कि आप लोग इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सेक्टर में बिल्कुल पैसा नहीं लगाते रहे हैं. तो अभी भी वही स्टैंड मेंटेन किया हुआ है, या वहाँ पर कुछ मूवमेंट आपको दिखता है और आप लोग इंटरेस्टेड होंगे इस सेक्टर में पैसा लगाने को?
As a bank, I think we have by and large over the last few years taken a call that we would like to restrict our exposures to the short and medium term in terms of tenure. Now, what that means is the moment you take such a call on the tenure, then automatically you will not be in play for financing longer term infrastructure projects. So that is the context in which we haven't sort of really got too much exposure to infrastructure. And that philosophy of taking essentially shorter tenure sort of calls, I think at this point of time still continues.
जी, मैंने इस सेक्टर का जिक्र इसलिए किया क्योंकि बाकी जो कुछ सेक्टर हैं ठीक चल रहे हैं, उस पर तो आपसे सवाल पूछना बहुत ज़रूरी नहीं है, लेकिन कंस्ट्रक्शन सेक्टर जहां पर कुछ अब ऐसा लगता है कुछ लोगों को कि उसमें कुछ ग्रीन शूट नज़र आ रहे हैं, और दूसरे साइड में कंज्यूमर सेक्टर में जहां लगता था कि काफ़ी बूम है क्योंकि इनकम्स बढ़ी हैं, वहाँ पर अब ग्रोथ थोड़ा सा स्लो डाउन होता हुआ दिख रहा है. ये असेसमेंट है आप लोगों का?
Haji, certainly on the consumer sector, I think we are starting to see early signs of the growth slowing down, whether it is in terms of automobiles, cars, etc. Sales over the last couple of months, or even at a broader level in what is called the FMCG sector. But I think this could be a temporary slowdown because currently there is not that much optimism in the overall sort of economy. And once a certain level of optimism comes back, I think this is a sector which can quickly bounce back. On the construction sector, I think it's a little more fundamental because they have got hit by a number of different things. I mean, partly many parts of the country, they got hit by the ban on mining, which was imposed by the courts. So that was a big blow to many people in the construction sector. And then, of course, there have been problems in states like Andhra because of completely different reasons. So I think there have been a bunch of reasons which has affected the construction sector. And hopefully some of those problems are now starting to reduce. So that's why you're probably starting to see some green shoots there.
जी अब प्योर पॉलिटिक्स जयराम साहब जो असेंबली के रिजल्ट आए उसके बाद जो भी मार्केट पार्टिसिपेंट्स हैं उनका एक जनरल कंसेंसस जनरल मूड क्या है वो ये अब मान के चल रहे हैं उनको एक सर्टेनिटी दिख रही है 2014 के लोकसभा चुनावों के आउटकम को लेकर के
No, I think from a market perspective, clearly what the market would like is a more decisive sort of government in place in the middle of 2014 after the elections. And I think that is what the belief is at this point of time, given what happened in the assembly elections. The belief is that some momentum has been now created in favor of the NDA. And if the belief is that if UP and Bihar, which are the two critical states with 120 sort of seats, if there is traction in those two states, then there is a distinct possibility that you could have a more decisive government in place in the middle of 2014. And I think most market participants are sort of really veering towards that theory. And this includes, as we have seen, some of the global players as well, the global brokerages who have projected that sort of a movement.
बिल्कुल तो ये जो आप डिसाइसिव गवर्नमेंट की एक्सपेक्टेशन की बात कर रहे हैं इसको जाहिर है कि एक मेजॉरिटी गवर्नमेंट के रूप में हम नहीं सुन रहे हैं हम ये समझ रहे हैं कि कोलिशन के फ्रेमवर्क में ही समवॉट डिसाइसिव समवॉट स्टेबल गवर्नमेंट की एक्सपेक्टेशन है और अगर ऐसी गवर्नमेंट की एक्सपेक्टेशन है तो वो फैक्टर क्या है जिनको आपको लगता है कि ये सरकार जो आएगी नई वाली वो एड्रेस कर देगी और उसमें गुड न्यूज़ होगा आप लोगों के लिए
No, I think, see, at a very fundamental level, and I'll just point out an example of Japan, which happened recently. For a long time, for many years, Japan has been going through extremely sluggish phase, and there was decided sort of pessimism about the Japanese economy. But we have seen that in the last round of elections, once Mr. Abe sort of took over, there's been a decisive governance on his part in terms of taking certain decisions and moving forward. And around that, there has been a lot of optimism around the Japanese economy. And hence, things are starting to look much better there. And the hope is that in India, you will see a similar sort of pattern, where once you have such a government in power, there will be some decisive moves towards governance, taking some strong decisions, whatever they may be. And that then will create a broader optimism with both domestic as well as global investors, that now you can actually see stronger sort of policy action in many parts, and that itself, I think, will drive an optimism.
बिल्कुल तो आप इस जो पॉलिसी एक्शन की पॉलिसी एक्शन में डिसाइसिव डिसीजन लेने की आप बात कर रहे हैं उसको अगर हम लोग शॉर्टलिस्ट करें तो एक की इशू के तौर पर आपसे आखिरी सवाल होगा मेरा ये समझना चाहूँगा मैं कि वो 4-5 इशू क्या है जिसमें कि ये भरोसा हो कि जो नई सरकार होगी वो पक्के तौर पर वैसा फैसला करेगी जो आप लोगों को लगता है कि पॉजिटिव होगा क्योंकि FDI इन रिटेल सब्सिडी लैंड एक्विजिशन और लेबर रिफॉर्म ये 4 इशू हैं मेरे ख्याल से जो कि टेस्ट केस होंगे किसी भी सरकार को जज करने के लिए
I would broadly agree with you, except that वो जब FDI की बात करें तो I don't think it is so important that you concentrate only on FDI in retail. I think what the broad market would like to see is that there is more openness towards bringing in FDI into many sectors. And it is not necessarily only in retail, but there are many other sectors also which theoretically, if they can be opened up to even a limited extent, could bring in far greater flows of money. So I think that is certainly one aspect that we need to be far more open in terms of flows into the country. Two is obviously on the whole infrastructure space. And I think there, some of the things which you mentioned, things like land acquisition, the other important thing is making available coal for the power plants, specifically on some of the port projects which have got stuck up. similarly road construction projects. I think on all of these, if we can see some decisive policy action, then I think that would be very critical for people to believe that the economy is now starting to move on.
बिल्कुल, जैसा आपने कहा जयराम साहब कि इकोनॉमी को अगर अब आगे मूव करना है तो कुछ बड़े और कड़े फैसलों की ज़रूरत होगी और इसके लिए सबके लिए अब टाइम फ्रेम हो गया है लोकसभा चुनाव के नतीजे और उसके बाद एक्सपेक्टेड ढंग पे एक डिसाइसिव सी सरकार। इस बातचीत में शामिल होने के लिए आपका बहुत शुक्रिया। नमस्कार।